Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished research professional and author who has a deep knowledge of Japan, from Japan right now, Dr. Megha Wadhwa. Megha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you. Megha is a researcher at the Free University of Berlin. She's an author, and all of you know I'm very partial to authors. She's an author of a book titled Indian Migrants in Tokyo, a study of cultural, religious, and working worlds. She's also been filming documentaries, including Daughters from Afghanistan. She did a 7-minute documentary, Indian Cooks in Japan, and Finding Their Niche, Unheard Stories of Migrant Women in 2022. So, Megha, before we talk about your book, please share with me your own academic and professional journey in brief.
Okay, so I moved to Japan in 2007. And at the time, before I moved to Japan, I was actually working for a Japanese company in India. And I was also learning Japanese language from Delhi University. And in the time, I thought that I want to learn more about Japan or more Japanese language. I just wanted to move abroad, but it was more for personal circumstances. But then there was this desire to do, even if I'm moving out, there has to be a Japanese element in what I do. And then I was considering Australia for my master's at the time, and planning to do a double degree course there, Japanese studies and international relations, some kind of course like that. But then my mentor of Japanese language, he's Professor Ashok Chawla, he insisted that I move to Japan, because if I want to do Japanese studies, why am I going to Australia?
Right.
Why, when you can go to Japan, go to Japan. So then and then he suggested that I should actually learn the language, take my language to next level. So I basically came to Japan in 2007, and my original plan was that I would learn language for 1.5, 2 years, and I will move back to India.
Okay.
And maybe do something related to Japanese language or something. But I think life had completely different plans for me. When I was learning the language, I was doing various small jobs. So I was working, I started, my first job was with actually a entity kind, it's a calling card company. And I was working there. And then it was a very English and Hindi oriented job while I was learning Japanese. And it was a very Indian and a very foreign atmosphere. So it was a very comfortable place. But then I think I was challenging to look outside my comfort zone. That was the reason why I left India. So then I was like, no, I have to challenge myself and be in a Japanese environment, because I'm here to learn Japanese language and to learn about Japan. So I quit that job after a month or two, I think. I don't clearly remember how many months I worked. And then I went to 5 minutes walk from where I was living. There was a Family Mart, which is like a convenience store. And I saw a post of they were recruiting part-timers. So I went to the person, and in my broken Japanese, I told him that I want to do a job here. Then I worked in that place for 6 months, and I think that played a very important role in especially improving my Japanese accent and making me a little confident in how I speak Japanese. But there is still a lot more Japanese I need to learn, I think. It's an ongoing journey. Then I remember one of those, I think there was this time I was going to meet somebody at the embassy, Indian embassy. And at the time, my university from where I did my graduation was on the way to the old embassy. Now the embassy is on a different station. And then I crossed this university and I looked at it and I was like, oh, I wish I could just get into this university one day. So I was like, I didn't know that maybe that was my moment of manifestation, And then few years down the line, sorry, I forgot to mention something very important. So after working 6 months for this convenience store, I moved to English teaching job. Because I thought like, okay, now I have had enough experience, and now because that job was very tough, it required a lot of heavy lifting, and it was like a lot of standing involved. And I was not, it was of course like lower than my skills because I was coming from a certain background atmosphere. So I thought, okay, I've taken 6 months of experience, but I don't think like now I can do more of this. So I decided to move to English teaching job. But then in that time too, like I wasn't getting like enough. Because I was supporting myself. I wasn't taking any money from my parents or anything. So I was like completely paying my fees and doing a lot of self-support. So sometimes when you do English teaching jobs, you do not get like enough hours of work that you are allotted to. And then I was like, if I have to do 2 jobs and finish my 28 hours of working, I would need to do one more job. And then I decided to do like, again, convenience store. Because then I thought, okay, I'll mix them too. So anyway, so after 2 years, then because I was doing teaching, that led me to, so Family Mart job, teaching job, all of this was of course for money, but there was a lot of experience that I was gaining, and it's shaping my thoughts as to what I want to do in the future for myself. You know, where do I want to go? Do I want to go back to the corporate world? Or do I want to go into the education line?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we'll have to move to your book.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm talking too much. That is my biggest problem.
No issues at all.
Okay, so I'll just cut it short. So I think that teaching profession basically led me to get into more into the education line because I started enjoying teaching very much. And then I was like, I want to study more because I want to get into teaching. And that is how I decided to go back to this university I had once manifested that I want to go to. So I applied to Sofia University for my master's, and I got through the entrance exam.
And this is the University of Berlin is what you're talking about.
No, I studied in Japanese university. It was Sofia University, Japan.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I had mixed scholarship in my second year of my master's, and then that opened up an opportunity for me to study further, which was then I did my doctoral in Japan. And that's what led me to stay in academia after that. And then I became like, I'm like super passionate about my research and what I am doing. So this was, so it was not like when I graduated, I was like, this is what I want to become. It was just my life experiences that led me to be the person I am.
Fantastic. So now I want to talk to you about your book, Indian Migrants in Tokyo, a study of socio-cultural, religious, and working worlds. Before I ask you the book, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Dr. Megha Wadhwa's book on Amazon. I'll go and check it out myself as well. So tell me a little bit about your book and what encouraged or inspired you to pursue research in migration.
So in my master's, I was actually working on gender. So I was looking into lives of Indian women after marriage, which was a very interesting research for me. And then when I got into my PhD, I was discussing with my mentor because I was very inspired by my mentor during my master's, who is an expert on Philippine migrants in Japan.
Okay.
And he used to talk a lot about the Philippine migrants. And then that used to, because I was an Indian migrant, I was myself going through a lot of struggles. I was meeting a lot of Indian migrants and we were having these discussions. And whenever he would do his presentation, I would be like, oh my God, there are so many things that we can also do about Indian migrants in Japan. And I think that was the spark, like he created that spark in me. And my own struggles, the struggles of the people that I was surrounded with, I felt like Indian community in the time that I was here did not have a voice. So I think that became, like at the back of my mind, I was like, I want people to know about the Indian migrants in Japan. And that is why I started writing for the print media, the Japan Times. And then I was like, I am doing this dissertation, but my aim is that this has to get published. I want the voices of people to be known. I want people to know actually what are their opportunities, what are their challenges, how did they come to Japan. So that was the main, it just all came together.
Fair enough. And tell me, Megha, how has the Indian community in Tokyo evolved over the years? I mean, I know I have several friends for whom Tokyo or Japan is home. They carry Japanese passports, and these are Indians. And what have been some of the factors that have contributed to this evolution?
So I think, like, as you said, like, you may know that, if you go back in time, and it started with, like, introduction of Buddhism, even though it was through Korea. And then, the first Indian merchant who came to Japan was in 1870. So, and now in the 21st century, you see an influx of professionals. So I think these things have evolved, like, from Yokohama, Kobe being the port, of a lot of Indians. Now it's Tokyo, like, where you see a lot of Indian professionals coming. And I would credit the Indian professionals for that matter, like the IT boom in India has played a critical role in changing the image of, like, India, not just in Japan, but all over the world.
Yeah.
Like, because people used to look at India as like a curry rice poor country, but now it's it's the country of gifted engineers. Like, now people look at us differently. So I would credit the Indian people who are working so hard, towards, growing professionally. They get the biggest credit of this change, or of, of this evolution that has come around the world, not just in Japan.
So one of the, I mean, I agree with you, because I've lived as an expat, not in Japan, but in several other countries. One of the unique challenges that you just spoke about was the impression of Indians, and I completely agree with you. But other than that, what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities that migrants from India have faced when they have moved to Japan?
So I think let's start with the opportunities, So, like, if we look into this whole concept of migration, I think, like, India, the whole migration opens up like a new horizon for you, It's just such a beautiful experience to live in a different culture. So I think this whole migration experience, and this experience when you come across the cultural shock, it actually benefits to shape your own personality, and also to understand your own culture better. I wouldn't talk about the normal opportunities that you have. Like, you have economic opportunities, of course, we all know, because that is the reason why majority of us do move to a foreign country. So I'm not talking about those regular opportunities. I think the actual opportunities are to know your own country better, to know yourself better, which the migration presents to anybody. And I think I recommend to not just Indians, everybody, even the Japanese people that I teach sometimes, that please leave your country and live in another country for future.
Absolutely.
Because and then in terms of challenges, I think, like, so these challenges can actually also shape you in a beautiful way. For example, the biggest challenge that an Indian comes across is, of course, the language. It is also food, because many vegetarians find it very difficult to adjust in Japan. The language, like I said, is a very big barrier, because that restricts your integration in the initial years, which are very crucial, because you are not able to make friends. That creates loneliness sometimes. But then how do you use that loneliness to your advantage is like an individual talent, like how you can use this to grow or understand yourself in that moment.
Yeah, well said. Well said. But tell me, I've been reading plenty of articles, and of course, I was reading a little bit to prepare for my conversation with you. How much of an influence has Japan's aging population had on the migration policies of the country?
I think it has had a huge impact, of course. Like, if you see in the 1990, it was only 0.7%, 0.75%, some 0.75%, or around that much, the percentage of the foreigners. But now it is like around 2%, a little over 2%. So it has changed a lot. But I think the problem still is that how are they going to make foreigners have a pleasant experience of staying in Japan? How can they have them stay over for a longer period of time. Or I don't know, maybe they don't want foreigners to stay for a longer period of time. They want them to go back after a certain period of time, because this is something many countries follow.
Sure, absolutely.
Like policies.
Absolutely.
But
And
yeah,
go ahead, please.
yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, there needs to be more effort to help these foreigners feel at home in Japan, if at all they do want to come to a proper solution for their aging population.
Well said. The also, every time I've gone and stayed in some other country, what influences a lot of the ability to stay there comfortable is the situation of the bilateral relations between two countries. The Japan and Indian bilateral relations are currently, I believe, at an all-time high.
Yeah.
How do you see these relations between nations impacting migrants from India?
I think okay, so for example, like I write about this in my book as well. So if you talk to like early migrants who had moved to Japan in that time, but I wouldn't say like India and Japan have ever had a bad relationship.
Absolutely.
Like there have been like a little bit of ups and downs, of course.
Yeah.
But they've never been like on bad terms ever. But of course, yeah, like you said, it's at the peak right now. That is also because India is in demand.
Correct.
So you can't afford not being friends with India,
Absolutely.
Japan or anybody else.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not trying to be arrogant, but it's the fact. Sorry.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the bilateral relationship helps from the perspective that if you see, like, like I said, the old people, when they moved to Japan, it was more about, curry, country of snakes, and then it
Elephants
moved.
walking down Marine Drive.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Even to me, somebody asked me if I owned an elephant during one of my English classes, and I was like, yeah, I do, but I don't take it to office because there's a lot of parking issue. So I keep my elephant at home, because I was being sarcastic. So but then this was like 2008, this conversation, somebody asked me this, but like down the line, 2011, 2013, like in that period, people started looking at India as like, wow, you're from India. For a very long time, they were confusing India and Indonesia. And this is something which many of the interviewees that I spoke to for my research also said, that the impression of India had changed. Now they look at Indians as, oh, you must be very clever, you must be very intelligent. So stuff like that.
No, I'm completely with you. I'm talking 3 decades ago when we moved to the Far East, and our little children now, they're of course big young men. But when they were 7 and 5, and they were swimming in the condominium, and some person came and asked my wife that, oh, I didn't know Indians could swim. So my wife responded and said, yeah, we have a pond next to our village, which is where they learned how to swim. So you're absolutely right on misconceptions. But tell me, most Indian migrants in most parts of the world somehow or the other manage to retain connections to their cultural and religious roots. How does this happen in Japan?
I think the Indian migrants in Japan, or in fact, like you said, like Indians anywhere in the world, they're doing like a beautiful job. Because I am now also doing research on Indians in Singapore and Indians in Germany. And I get so impressed, like the kind of efforts they make. For example, some they have tried to, make so there is a religious place which is not just a religious place for Indians. Of course, it is a religious place. People like, there is a routine. They want to go. They have that craving that, they want to go to the temple, do, a little bit of prayer and stuff.
Correct.
Or they want to teach their children to do that. So for that, they make efforts. In Japan, you have like Indian people who they have small temples. Some also have small temples at home that they open for the community. There are organizations that organize festivals like Diwali, Holi, and as the number of Indians are increasing, the festivals are becoming bigger because they have more funding. So they make lots of efforts. And also at individual level, people are making an effort to, not just to keep their own culture, but also to spread it or make the Japanese people aware of their culture, So the efforts are being made. sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. And even like Indian Embassy holds many events. There are other groups like, you know, in the area where there are a lot of Indians. There's some individuals who have, you know, a place where they invite people from India to do some kind of cultural events. And a lot of efforts are being made by people to keep the cultural intact.
Well said. My next question to Megha is about, I wanted to get your perspective on the role of gender experiences of Indian migrants in Japan.
Yeah. That's a topic that creates a little bit of sadness in me.
I've been to Japan several times, which is why I put this question in for you.
Yeah, also because my latest film, Finding Their Niche, Unheard Stories of Migrant Women, is actually a story of two trailing spouses, women who follow their husbands as a result of marriage. And their expectations are like, you know, like they come with an expectation, like when you move abroad, have certain aspirations, but then it's just like, you know, suddenly everything shatters. The world is totally a different place for them. So then, I think I'll just start. It's not just for Indian migrants. I think there is a lot of gender issue in Japan.
Absolutely.
As a society itself. The other day I was seeing this poster where they're talking about a conference about SDG in a university, and the poster has 5 or 6 old men on the photo, all of them Japanese, no diversity at all. So why are we even talking about diversity? What is the meaning of diversity is something people need to know. It just but then when you talk about gender, how do you fit that gender in diversity? It becomes like more, you know, depressing. Just the other day, I was just having a conversation with one of my friends, and both of us, like, you know, if you are a career-oriented person as a woman, I think you will face far more challenges to reach your dreams.
Correct.
In Japan, in comparison to a male migrant, male Indian migrant. So there is a lot of challenge. Like I do have like, and this problem is big amongst the trailing spouses who actually move as a result of marriage in comparison to women like me who actually move for their career. But for us also, the path is not easy. Nonetheless, it's harder for them because they don't come prepared. I at least had a Japanese language background. They come here because they want to start a new life. So I think like when you get married, starting a new life anyways is difficult, you know, because you're moving to a different atmosphere. But then it becomes 100 times more difficult because you're moving to a new country. You're leaving behind your social circle. So I think there is a lot of conversation that is required in order to pay attention to how this can help the migrants integrate, especially these group of migrants, to be integrated in the society, because they are the wives of the highly skilled migrants who are actually contributing in the economy of, you know, like economically they are contributing to Japan. So, and Japan needs them.
Absolutely.
So if they need them, they need to pay attention to the gender aspect.
Well said.
Very much,
so, Megha, I have time for one more question. And therefore, I'm going to ask you this question based on all the work that you have done for migrants, and given the fact that Japan is opening its doors to a lot of people from India, what advice would you give to aspiring migrant, not workers, but migrant Indians who are interested in going and working in Japan?
I think like one of the most important advice I would give to any migrant is that before you move to any country, please do your homework. And like I said in the beginning of the interview, I am very much in favor of migration for a few years. For long term, that is your personal choice. But going and living out in a different country is a beautiful thing and a beautiful experience for your growth. But don't get lured into the jobs that you're being offered, negotiate, know your value, be strong, don't sell yourself short. Like I said, do your homework, and all this includes, like doing your homework in the sense like coming to Japan. Try to know that how much of your Japanese skills will help you in the job you're into, or know what kind of place you can have, how many Indians are there. And social media has made these things very easy.
Correct.
So all these, getting more information about the new destination that you're moving to is very important.
Very important.
And look into the right sources. Read my book.
Read your book, of course.
Or watch my films.
Absolutely. So on that note, Megha, and your last point, which is so important, and there's so much wisdom in it, that before you even consider moving overseas, do your homework and don't sell yourself short. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. I mean, I think you seem to have been very clear for a long time that Japan beckons, and therefore that is where you wanted to be. That's very creditable for someone young. Thank you for speaking to me about your book, Indian Migrants in Tokyo. Thank you also for speaking to me about so many different aspects about life in Japan. Thank you again, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.